Well, good morning. This is our last week for this White Church series. The whole point of the White Church series was to talk about the value of the church and also to kind of give a defense of it. I think there's a lot of people who take the attitude that church is optional. You know, if you want to be a Christian, church, you can do that or not do that. It has nothing to do with you being a Christian. And we don't really hold to that. We think that church is not only kind of an essential part of it in terms of being very valuable, but it might even be an essential part of it in terms of whether or not you're really saved. I mean, one of the things that we pray for, and we talked about this last week at some level, the Lord's Prayer, where we pray, your will be done, your kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. The church is where the first evidence of that is, the first fruit of all that comes to be. And it's in the church, hopefully, where you can start to see the vision of God come to fruition. Now, it doesn't always work like that, of course. A lot of us, if you've been in church very long at all, have had a bad experience at church. The same way I've had a bad experience at Arby's, but I still go. I've had a bad experience at Walmart more often than I'd like to count, but I still show up there on occasion. But church is different than any of those other kind of consumer things because church is at some level a laboratory where we're trying to prove that prayer, your will be done, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. We want the church to be a place that reflects this grand vision of God. And we believe that vision of God has old roots. 3,000 years ago, more than that, 4,000 years ago, a man named Abraham is in the desert, and he has this vision of stars. And he's 75. He's never had a child. In that day, that kind of signified a failure for you as a man or a woman. If you didn't have a child, you were kind of second rate. You weren't going to leave any sort of legacy. And God speaks to him one night and says, "You are going to have a child, and not only are you going to have a child, but through that child and their children and their children and their children, you're going to produce a family that will be as many as the stars in the sky." In another place, he challenged him, "Count them. Count the stars if you can." That's what your descendants are going to be like. And we believe that through Abraham, the nation of Israel came, but more for us, we believe that ultimately we've been grafted into that plan. That through Abraham's descendants and now through the church, that we're to reflect God's glory. And that the same way that stars shine, we're supposed to shine. We're in a dark world, and a lot of times things don't go the way that they're supposed to go. But through the church, that when God looks down here at this dark world, He's supposed to see us shining like stars. Philippians talks about that. It says we're to become a blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. And then he says, you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. What Paul writes about here 2,000 years ago is the same promise that Abraham saw in the sky 4,000 years ago. That one day God was going to pull a people separate to him and that they were going to reflect his plan for the world. And we pray for it. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Your will be done, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. That's the whole basis for the prayer. That's what you're asking God for, and you're asking him to show up, and his avenue and his vehicle for doing that is the church. And not just Mount Pleasant Church, certainly, but all the church. I mean, it's through his people that God's going to make himself known. And at some level, all the different groups and denominations and groups and sects and clubs and every other part of parachurch, all that stuff together, it forms kind of a quilt, a patchwork mosaic that is supposed to, at some level, reflect God. And then we talked about that last week, that we reflect and demonstrate the manifold wisdom of God to the whole world. Now, Jesus, when he's explaining that vision to his disciples, gets a couple of hundred people up on a hillside, and he explains it to them. And again, he uses that star kind of language. And he says, you're the salt of the earth. And we're going to talk about this in some more detail here in a second. You're the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? no longer good for anything except to be thrown out, trampled underfoot. He says, you're the light of the world. And that's that star language. You're the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden, and people don't light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. He says, in the same way, you let your light shine before others so they can see your good deeds and give God glory. Now I want to talk about all that. It all has some value for us, so I'm going to skip back here and talk about it. When Jesus says, you're the salt of the earth, we don't know 100% exactly what aspect of salt that he's talking about. Maybe all the different aspects. Three big ones that kind of spring to mind. Salt was a preservative. You know, if you put salt on something like meat, it would keep it. And you could salt the meat, and the meat would not rot, and it wouldn't spoil, and it would last a lot longer. And maybe he's saying, you're the salt of the earth like that. You know, you're there to preserve the world. You're there to be a cleansing agent, you know. You can rub salt on something to kind of cleanse it and purify it and keep it. That might be what he's saying. Salt certainly has some value as a flavoring thing. My dad will salt a salad if we let him, and some of you might do that. Put salt on everything, and it has that quality to it. And some people like salty food more than any other kind of food, and maybe that's what Jesus is saying. You know, the same way salt flavors the food and makes it taste better, you're right to go out there and be a flavoring agent to the world, and hopefully, again, give some signal. There's also this thing that was true then that's not so much true now, but salt was valuable in a way that today it doesn't hold quite the same value. Even that word salary, the word your salary, you get paid a salary, that word in Latin, salarium, which we draw it from, meant to be paid in salt. And a lot of times the Roman soldiers were given salt as part of their pay. It wasn't all their pay, but it was part of their pay. It had some value, and salarium means paid with salt, and we get the word salary from it. If a man's worth is salt, that's a phrase that not used as much anymore. But the idea that it had value, and maybe he's saying some of that. Like I said, we don't know for sure exactly which one of those things, but they all kind of had the same gist to it. And you're to be that to the world. You're to go out there and make some sort of a difference in the world, and they should notice when you're there. A lot of people say they're Christian, but they're not fulfilling this. Something like 50% of the country says they're Christian, but if you put 50 grams of salt on 100 grams of meat, you'd taste it. And a lot of people don't live this out. They don't actually do it. When Jesus says, if the salt loses its saltiness, we don't know for sure what he's saying there. I mean, salt at some level is a stable compound. It won't quit being salt. Salt is always going to, it's chemically, it doesn't lose, but it can get corrupted. I mean, you can have, it can attach to mud or gets mixed in with some mud or some soil or something like that. And the mud and the different things will dull the taste of it. And it says if salt loses its saltiness, it's not good for anything anymore. And I think there's always a risk for me as a Christian, or for you, or for anybody else, to allow a sin to get into our lives and make us a little less effective. Sometimes it's not a powerful thing. It's not, you've not killed anybody, and maybe you can even excuse it. It's not being that big a deal because lots of people are like this. Maybe you can excuse it because that's just how you are. Somebody says, why do you lose your temper? Well, that's just how I am. I've always hot-tempered family. Or why do you have to do all these different things the way you do? Why do you drink so much? Or why do you treat the kids that way? Or why aren't you around like you say? Well, that's just how I am. You can't help it. And we can excuse our sin. Sometimes it's not even really a sin thing. It's just some hobby or some distraction that eats up so much of your time that you're not able to do the things that you're supposed to do. The whole It's not uncommon at all. I remember making an illustration of this in a sermon several years ago, and it was kind of a remarkable thing. I remember when I first told it, that I said I went to dinner. Julie and I went on a date, and there was a couple across from us at a table, and I think they were on a date too, but they never talked to each other. They were on their phones the whole time, and it just seemed like a remarkable thing that anybody would do that. Now, it's kind of remarkable if you go to a restaurant and there's not at least 3 or 4 couples scattered out around there doing that sort of thing. And it's not sin to look at your phone, not necessarily sin to look at your phone, but it can be such a distraction, and again, such a, I don't want to say addiction, but such a habit that you don't do the things you're supposed to do. And I think that's how the devil gets in there and makes that salt lose its saltiness. And I think that can affect a lot of us. Sin has a way of entangling. Hebrews 12 says we get rid of all the sin that entangles so we can run towards God. It attacks our heart, different little lusts or greed or anger or pride or just being distracted in some other place when you should be focused. He gets into our heart, and suddenly the salt isn't salty anymore. Several years ago, and I've told this before, it's my favorite story. I have a guy that I look up to in ministry that we've been friends for a long time, Tommy Oakes, and he got a doctorate from Eastern Tennessee State in storytelling. And I remember thinking, man, what a cool doctorate. I don't know that you could use it for anything except for this, what I do, but I thought, what a cool doctorate. If I ever go back for a doctorate, which again, probably not happen, but if I ever did, that's what I would go for is storytelling. And my very favorite story that I've ever heard or heard. It was in a book called View from a Zoo. A guy named Gary Richmond wrote it. And it was such a cool story. And when we were in California, he was going to be speaking at this camp. It was a father-son retreat, so I dragged my son up there. I don't know that he really wanted to. We made a race car. You remember? And we went to this retreat a long time ago, and Gary Richmond was speaking at it, and I was so caught by it. He did it. He opened. He talked a few things, and I went up to him afterward. I said, "Hey, you told this story in that book. It's my favorite story." And Richmond says, "It's one of my favorite stories." And he told it like the next time he got up and spoke. You may not think so, but I just think it's amazing. So here's the story, and I have told it here before. But just enjoy it like you would enjoy an Andy Griffith rerun. It'll be over in a second. So here we go. Okay, Richmond, his job at the zoo was to just help the veterinarian. That was his job. So if any animal was sick, he and the veterinarian would go and they would take care of it. And he took care of a lot of different animals. He said, I got to be right in there, with a lot. And sick animals can sometimes be a little dangerous. Because they're more unpredictable or things aren't quite right. But he said the scariest thing that we ever had to do at the San Diego Zoo was deal with the king cobra that they had. Somehow the zoo, before they got the cobra, it had been attacked, like got in a fight, probably with a mongoose, and it had scarred its eye, so it kind of had a sinister look to it, not gentle and friendly like the other cobras. And he said we'd have to go in there because when the snake would shed its skin, the cap on the eye wouldn't come off. Because that scar, the cap wouldn't come off, and we would have to go in there, the veterinarian, take that cap off of the cobra's eye, which by itself would be a reason I would never go into zoo veterinarian work. I just can't imagine how terrifying something like that would be. And it was a big snake. Cobra can get about a third of its body up off the ground, and so it could get about 18 inches, 24 inches up when it was hood flared and everything. And they would have to go in there every time the snake shed its skin to take that off. So the day came when it was due to happen, and he got the head herpetologist there, the head snake guy at the zoo. He's there, and he has his 2 assistants, and they've both got like these big butterfly kind of nets that they've got ready to help out, and then the veterinarian. And then Gary, and they're all getting ready to take care of this cobra. And they're in the back hallway behind where people can see, and they open up the door of the cage, and the cage is about 3.5 feet high, and that cobra then, when he comes to the edge, and he's mad because you're into his turf, he's already got the hood up, and he's up, and so he's about eye level with all of them when he slithers back there to the back of the cage. The head snake guy is standing in front of the cage. He's about 6 foot away from it, standing in front of the cage, and his 2 assistants are here. And snakes, I guess, animals, but these kinds of snakes are relatively predictable. The head guy in front, he's the biggest threat because he's right in front of him there. The other 2 guys are kind of at a distance. And so the snake kind of sizes them all up and roars. I didn't know snakes roared, But he told it that way in the book, and he told it that way in the when he told it live. Then it makes it scarier. So I'm going to say that the snake roared. I don't know that they do, but it makes it scarier to me. And the snake would roar and struck out at the head guy. And he quickly turned around, grabbed it by the back of the head, and put it on the ground. And the other two guys get their butterfly nets on them best they can, or whatever they're carrying, and they're holding the snake so that it won't thrash around and hurt itself. And so the veterinarian says, "Okay, get the cap off." So he starts working on it, the veterinarian, and he's sweating and he's nervous, and the head guy's sweating and he's nervous. And the head herpetologist says to Gary, he says, "Check your hands. Are there any cuts or scrapes on your hands?" He goes, "No, they look good. Now check real careful. This is important." So he said, "I looked very, very careful, and I couldn't see any cuts or scrapes." And he said, "Okay, go over and get as many paper towels into a softball size ball as you can." So I got them all there, and I came back, and I handed it to him. So, "Oh, no, I want you to put it in the snake's mouth." And what? He goes, "Yeah, I want you to put it in the snake's mouth." So he gets this, tries to get as close as he can, and finally the snake lunges at it and starts chomping on it, and it goes yellow with venom. And while all that's happening, the head snake guy is talking to Richmond. He said, "A big snake like this, I mean, if you could put all that venom into one bite, they can drop an elephant. And if he bit me with a full venom sac, I wouldn't be alive long enough to get to the antivenom. So what we want to do is empty his venom sacs, because I've been holding him for now 15 minutes, and I'm starting to cramp up, and he's really mad, and I mean, anything could happen. And we want to empty those sacs as best we can." I said, "Well, great." So took the thing and threw it away. And he said, "I backed way up to the back, and the veterinarian backed up to the back, and they got the snake in there pretty good. No events, and the door came down, and it was done until next time, And the head snake guy said, "These big snakes," this is the part I want you to catch. "These big snakes, they're easy to catch if you know how, but they're hard to let go of." You see, sin is like that. It's easy to catch. Any knucklehead can get into sin. It's not hard. I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, you can be caught in a whole bunch of sin before you realize it. And our world is sin sick. You just don't run into anybody that's not struggling with it somewhere. And it can get you too. And I have found that Christians possess an enormous quantity to be hypocrites about that. Now, I do it. And it's easy to hide. And then one day the sin gets a little bit out of hand. You blow up at the wrong person, or your greed starts to show a little bit, your wife's mad, "I can't believe you did that." Leads to a whole argument there. Or maybe you're getting so distant from your spouse that it's, or somebody catches you looking at something you shouldn't be looking at, or something happens. And all of a sudden you realize that this little thing that you thought was kind of harmless is getting to be kind of big. And it's real hard to get out of that stuff once you allow it to get in your life. Those big snakes are easy to get a hold of, but they're hard to let go of. And I think the devil does that all the time with people. If the salt loses its saltiness, back to this idea here, that's how it happens. You just get caught up in something. And you put up with it, and you don't let go of it. And when that happens, when he says thrown out and trampled underfoot, it's trash. It's just not good for anything anymore. When you allow that to happen, you're just not valuable. Salt has value, but that kind of salt doesn't, and you just can't do the things that God wants you to do. And that's the first part. The second part here, he says, "You're the light of the world," right? And a town on a hill can't be hidden. That makes sense. And he might have even been talking. Galilee was kind of a hilly place, and there were a couple of cities that were kind of high up on ridges, and you'd see them from a long distance, and that would be an easy thing to understand. And people don't light a lamp and put it under a bowl because it snuffs it out, right? Nobody lights a lamp and puts it under a bowl. Instead, you use it in a big way so that people can see. And again, the same way with salt, Satan can't get rid of the salt, so he corrupts it. Satan can't get rid of the light, so he hides it. He camouflages it. He makes it so you can't see it anymore. It's still there, you just can't See it. 2 Corinthians 4:4 says that Satan blinds the minds of people so they can't see the light of the glory of God. He blinds their minds so you can't see it. And that's what he does with us. He uses fear and worry and distraction. And suddenly a good Christian just doesn't shine very much. Maybe they're afraid they'll give the wrong impression, or maybe they're worried that it won't come off like they want it to, or they won't have the right answers if they bring this thing up, or maybe they're just playing Candy Crush on their phone and time got away from them. But whatever it is, there was this chance to be some sort of a difference, and you didn't use it because you were hidden. I used the cobra thing for the first thing. Fireflies is my big illustration for this. When I was a kid, I liked to go catch fireflies and put them in a jar, and they'd always be dead the next morning. Or you'd put the holes in the deal, and then maybe you'd have fireflies all over your room the next morning. And I used to think that was a lot of fun, and I'd go catch them as a little guy. I got to a few years ago reading about the fireflies. And besides little boys, the big enemy of the fireflies are frogs, apparently. And frogs catch the fireflies because they see them shining. Frogs don't see them unless they shine, and they'll see them shine out there, and then zap, frog gets them. I understand, and I've not been able to find a picture of this even online, but I read it in Wikipedia or someplace, that frogs can eat so many fireflies that they will start to glow. Which, if I had been a little boy with a glowing frog in a jar with the little holes in there, I'd have really had something. But I've never seen it, and I don't know that that's real either. It made like that roaring snake. I'm not sure it's true, but I read it once, and I thought that was a pretty cool fact that kind of stuck in my head. And it would seem like, if evolution has any validity to it at all, that somewhere along the lines, there would have been some smart fireflies that would have gotten together and said, hey, listen, if we don't shine, then no little boys or frogs will eat us. And so I read about it more, because it does seem like a curious thing. If this is the only way the frogs can get them, that sooner or later there'd be a strand of firefly that didn't shine. And as I read more about it, what I found is this is the way that they signal to one another that they're, like in the spring when a young firefly's heart turns to love, then they'll shine out like that. And people the other fireflies will see, and then that's how it happens. Magic happens, like firefly magic, dating and such. And that's how that happens. And so if the fireflies ever did say, I'm not going to shine anymore, well, that'd just be the end of the fireflies. They're made to shine. And it takes a lot of risk to shine like that. Sometimes you get shot down or eaten by a frog. I thought about this with like a junior high dance. Some little boy walks across the floor to ask some girl to dance, and she goes, no. And so he has to walk of shame all the way back to the other side. But if you don't take that chance, then you never get to dance. So little boys have pushed themselves all through the years to walk across the gym floor there and make that request. Because if you don't shine at all, then that's the end. There's no more. Frogs be damned. So you have to jump out there and take your risk, take your chance, see what happens. And we have to do that too. The devil tries to keep us quiet by making us scared or making us worried or making us afraid. But if we don't shine, then it all ends with us. We're called to let our light shine in such a way that people will see what we're doing, and it will turn them to God. Now all of that goes back to this original vision, right? The stars in the sky. The same thing Abraham saw. When we shine, it gives people in a dark world some glimpse of what it's supposed to be like. Now, without question, the church has failed on this millions of times. If I can imagine that somebody would have wanted to tell God, I'm not sure there's not a better plan than this plan. It seems like we just have a hard time doing what we're supposed to do. But this is the plan, and God's not going to vary from it. He wants us to go out there broken like we are and distracted like we are, and be salt, be light in this world. As a church, we're supposed to push one another to that end. One of the more famous verses in Hebrews says, "Let us consider how we might spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up." That good deeds, remember, you let your good deeds so shine before people that they glorify God. So let us consider how we might spur one another on. The word spur could be translated irritate. Let us consider how we might irritate people to become better. And I think about why I wouldn't want to push anybody. And the reason is I don't want to be an irritation to them. I don't want to get in their business. I don't want people to think less of me, that guy is pushing me a little bit. I don't know if I like that. And it's very tempting because of that to kind of mind my own business. Who am I to stick my nose into something else? But we're told, nay, even commanded here, let us consider how we might push one another, how we might spur one another on towards love and good deeds. In other words, you might not do it on your own. I've never worn spurs on a horse. We used to have horses, and we would ride them quite a bit. And sometimes you have to really encourage the horse to go do what you want him to do. Once I was on a horse that got bit by a horsefly while I was on it. That spurred the horse along pretty good, and took a while to get it under control. And we're called to push one another. And the way we push is we don't give up meeting together. And he's not thinking, when the author of Hebrews wrote this, about a building like this, because they didn't have buildings like this. It's all the meetings. It's when you all get together in one room, or just when 3 or 4 of you are getting together and you're having lunch, or when a few of you are together and you're working and you push one another. He says some people have gotten in the habit of not doing that. And there's a lot of Christians in our day who have gotten in the habit of not prioritizing that. Anything in the world can get in the way of it. And you're not, I got to be careful because sometimes just coming in here, it's possible to just come in here and sit quietly for an hour and leave and not talk to anybody, or really not even know anybody. I mean, you're at some level, when you get together in here, at very little risk of being spurred on, unless I do it and you hear it, from the stage. You could come in here and leave and not. So he's talking about a little more of an intimate meeting, that some sort of a smaller group or maybe one-on-one, where you don't give up the habit of pushing one another, of meeting with one another, of getting to know one another, And we encourage, we put the courage into people. That's what that word literally means. We put the courage into people because we don't have forever. One day, it's all going to be over. A lot of you will exit by the cemetery, and that should be a sign to us every time we get together that every day is precious. We don't know how many days we have. And so one day we'll have to stand in front of God. And so all this verse says that we want to push one another to do what we're supposed to do, to shine in this world, to get rid of the sin that slows us down, to not be snuffed out by worry or fear, to do the good deeds, to live the life that we're supposed to live. And there's 1,000 ways to do that too. I mean, building beds or teaching kids, or VBS coming up here, just the 2 announcements Mark made. I mean, easy ways to come in there and make some sort of a difference that people are going to see. And they may wonder, why would you get up your whole Saturday morning to sand beds? Well, let me tell you about that. And suddenly you've got a chance to explain your relationship with God. And that's what we're here for. And at some level, when you get together and you're pushing one another to do these things, you're going to leave encouraged. I've been doing ministry since 1990, and I have found with great consistency the biggest indicator as to whether somebody will get through a hard time is whether or not they're connected in church. That's the biggest indicator to me. If a person's not connected in church and they don't have any connection here and they don't have any friends here and they've not really plugged themselves in and then something happens, I've seen people sometimes walk away from all of it. Mad, you know. I got mad, I got sick, and I was gone 3 weeks, and nobody checked on me. And if it's somebody that I know a little better, I might ask them. Any of the times before that, when someone was sick, did you check on them? No. Do you know anybody at the church really close? Not really. On the other hand, I've seen people who are deeply connected here get bad news. The same kind of bad news that caused one person to leave faith altogether. And they find that when they get the bad news, that they're praying more, that they're digging even deeper into God, that they're running towards Him, not away from Him. And it all started with having just a few of those relationships. You don't need very many, because you're made for this. I think a lot of times as Christians, we think the whole point of this thing is to learn some stuff. And He wants you to shine. He wants you to take what you've learned and make some sort of a difference in this thing. We live in a dark world. The sin nature. You know, one of the things that church teaches is that every person in here has a dark side, a sin nature, that live by the flesh. It's always a temptation. We believe that. Now, there's a lot of people in the world who say that's not true, that people are born completely innocent and good, and that only by brushing up against knuckleheads do they turn bad, that kids are born with this inherent goodness. And the Bible disagrees with that. It says almost immediately there's this streak that will start showing up. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here, but we saw it with our own kids. I mean, you were great. But with the others, I mean, we saw it pop up pretty fast. And we never had to teach them how to lie. We never had to teach them how to cut a corner on something like that. We never had to explain that. They just knew it automatically. I remember when Alicia was like 2 years old, we had a stereo there, and I was real proud of it. It cost a lot of money for me at the time, and we had this stereo in the living room, had this great big knob to turn the volume up and down. And she thought that was so cool. And we might have some music playing, and all of a sudden it's a rock concert there. You know, we're going to bother the people in the other apartments because she would take that and crank it there. And so we had to have a rule that you can't touch that unless we're in there. And so we heard it go off one day, and we go in there and say, hey, listen, you can't touch that if we're not in here. And she looks at me and then puts her hand out on it. I mean, I still remember it happening. She looks at me and then just does it anyway. So I took her little hand and I smacked her little hand, said no. And tears, immediately. And then her lip stuck out and she put her hand up there again. So I smacked her hand again. I had to do it 3 times, and her hand's getting a little red, and I know it's got to hurt her, and I'm thinking I'm losing a standoff to a 2-year-old. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm chewing my nails the whole time. I don't know what's going to happen here. And then eventually she walked away, and I was relieved. I didn't know how to take it up a notch. Usually the hand slap was enough to get things done, and I didn't know how to fix it. But I never taught her to do that. She's just 2 years old. And there's just something in us. G.K. Chesterton's a famous writer about Christian things from the last century, and he said, the sin nature is the easiest part to prove of the Christian story. Somebody says, prove to me there's a God. Well, that can be kind of hard, but prove the sin nature? Man, just pick up a paper or get on the internet or just talk to your neighbors. I mean, you just don't run into anybody that's not struggling with doing stuff that they don't even want to do. I mean, on big and small things. How many people have you known? I mean, thousands of people that you've known who say that they're on a diet about something. Maybe usually food. I'm trying to lose a little weight, and then you'll go to them to a graduation party, and they're getting 2 cupcakes, and I think, wait a minute, I thought you were trying. Well, I'm just going. I can't. I'm going to just get one. And even when you make a decision, I really want to make some changes here. It's hard to do. There's just something in us that's broken. Right? I mean, we all feel that. And we didn't learn how to do it. We've always had it. And into all that, we're supposed to shine. We're supposed to come in there and make some sort of a difference. And you're a sinner too, right? So you don't come at them from a position of superiority. It's more like one starving person showing another starving person where to find the bread. I mean, we're in this together, but the world is hungry to know. And as Christians, I understand the temptation to not do it, to not shine. I understand the temptation to kind of keep it quiet. I get all that. But this is just way too important. Teddy Roosevelt was making a speech in France, and he was challenging the European leaders who were collected there that we need to be better citizens. That was the point of what he's getting ready to say. But it's my favorite, maybe my favorite presidential quote ever, certainly my favorite of his. And he was challenging people not to stay on the sidelines. And it's the kind of quote that when I read it, it kind of fires me up. And like I said, Jesus didn't say this, and Teddy wasn't talking about church. But it's just an awesome quote. He says this here. He says, it's not the critic that counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to a man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again because there is no effort without error or shortcoming. In other words, when you try, you're going to stumble. But here's a guy who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows that in the end, the triumph of high achievement, but even at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place will never be amongst those cold and timid souls who knew neither victory nor defeat. That, to me, is the call of the church, is to take chances. We want to shine our light in this community and make some sort of a difference. And if we succeed in that, then God's will be done. His kingdom will come even to this place. And what an awesome thing that would be if we could see that in our lifetime. But even if we fail, even if it takes longer than we think, at least we're fading while we're trying something important, That the whole point of church is not just to get together and sing the same old songs, but the point of coming together is so that we can push one another in this great call to light up a dark world. Let me pray with you. Dear Lord God, I just thank you for this group. I pray, God, for the ones who are caught up by sin. They have the weight of it on them, and they, without thinking very hard, they know where it's at. They know about the conflicts that they're having, those places where they don't forgive, those places where they've just gotten used to a war, and they know where, or maybe it's some greed thing, and they're not taking chances with their time and their resources, God, in a way that honors you, or maybe it's lust, or pride, or envy, just laziness. God, there's 1,000 different things that knock us down. So I pray for anybody in here who wants to be who you want them to be. I pray, God, that they be brave enough to let your light shine on that part of their life and start making some changes. I pray also, God, for the person who's just timid or scared about sharing who they are, sharing what they believe, even with people who are most precious to them. God, I pray for some little spark of courage. Help us, God, to push one another to this bigger, dream that you have of redeeming not only the people in this room, but this whole community. That God, you want to change us. Help us, God, to have a passion like you have passion, to see that, God, the way that you see that. And drive us, God, to be the people who we're supposed to be. In Christ's name, amen. I want you to